Sira had not eaten in 3 days. She sat at the far edge of the market square, pressed against the base of a crumbling stone wall, her knees pulled to her chest and her tail curled tight around her feet. Her scales, which should have been a deep amber color, had gone dull and dry. Her wings lay flat against her back, too weak to lift. Her eyes were half closed, and she watched the busy square the way a person watches rain through a window, seeing it, but not really part of it. The market was loud and full. Stalls stretched from one end of the square to the other, draped in colored cloth and loaded with bread, dried meat, fruit, and warm things that smelled of butter and spice. People moved between the stalls in thick crowds, calling out to each other, laughing, bargaining, carrying baskets and bags. Children ran between the legs of adults. Dogs trotted along the edges, hoping for scraps. No one looked at Sira. Or rather, they looked, and then looked away. A woman with a bread stall caught Sira's eye once, early in the morning. The woman's face had twisted. She turned her back and straightened her loaves and did not look again. 2 young men passed close by. One of them noticed Sira and nudged the other. "Still here," the first one said. "Someone should move her on," said the second. They kept walking. A merchant dragging a cart of vegetables steered wide of Sira's corner without slowing. A child pointed at her, and a mother quickly pulled the child's hand down and hurried them away without a word. Sira did not react to any of it. She had stopped reacting days ago. She had learned, in the weeks since she had come to this town, that reacting to things only made it worse. If she looked at people too long, they got uncomfortable. If she made any sound, they got afraid. If she moved suddenly, the whole square tensed up like something terrible was about to happen. So she sat still. She stayed small. She kept her wings flat and her claws tucked under her tail and her eyes low. She was 14 years old. She did not look it. She looked much younger, because she had not had a proper meal in a very long time. Before the flood, she had lived in a valley 2 weeks' travel east of this town. Her clan had been small but comfortable, 30 or so dragons spread across a rocky hillside above a wide river. They had kept goats, grown root vegetables, traded wool and carved stone with the nearest human settlements. It had not been a rich life, but it had been a full one. Then the rains came. 3 weeks of rain, more than anyone could remember. The river swelled. The hillside turned to mud. On the last night, the water had risen so fast that there was almost no time at all. Sira remembered her mother's voice in the dark, sharp and urgent. She remembered being pushed upward, told to fly, told to go. She remembered the sound of the hillside giving way. She had flown. She had kept flying until she could not anymore. She had come down outside this town because her wings had given out. She had stayed because she did not know where else to go. By midday, the sun was high and the square was at its busiest. The smell of food had become something close to pain for Sira. Not hunger exactly, she had moved past hunger into something quieter and heavier. A kind of emptiness that sat in her chest and made everything feel far away. She had her head resting back against the stone wall, eyes nearly closed, when she heard footsteps slow near her. She did not look up at first. Footsteps slowed near her sometimes. Usually they picked up again quickly. These ones stopped. She opened her eyes. A man stood a few feet away, looking at her. Not with the tight, uncomfortable look most people gave her. Not with fear or disgust. He was just looking, the way a person looks at something they are genuinely trying to understand. He was not a tall man. He had a worn traveling pack on his back, a plain brown coat with the collar turned up, and boots that had seen a lot of road. He had a calm, ordinary face. The kind of face that did not belong to anyone important. His name, though Sira did not know it yet, was Ben. Ben looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at the square around her. At the space people had left between themselves and her corner. At the way the crowd moved in a shape that curved around her without quite acknowledging she was the reason it curved. He looked back at her. Sira waited for him to move on. They always moved on. Ben set his pack down on the ground beside him. He crouched, bringing himself to her level, and tilted his head slightly to the side. "You look like you have been sitting there a long time," he said. His voice was even and quiet. Not soft in a careful way, like someone trying not to startle an animal. Just normal. Sira said nothing. She did not know what kind of answer he was looking for, and she had learned that giving the wrong answer made things worse. Ben did not seem bothered by her silence. He looked at the ground beside her, then back at her. "Is it all right if I sit here for a minute?" he asked. That was not a question she had expected. She had expected him to tell her to move, or to ask her something suspicious, or to simply walk away. She had not expected to be asked permission for anything. She gave a small, slow nod. Ben sat down on the ground beside her, his back against the same wall, his pack between his feet. He did not make a production of it. He did not look around to see if anyone was watching. He just sat. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Around them, the market carried on. A few people nearby noticed. A woman at a nearby stall stared openly. A man with a bundle of cloth under his arm slowed his walk, glanced at them, and then kept going with a slight frown on his face. Ben did not notice or did not care. He looked out at the square with an easy, unhurried expression, like a man with nowhere particular to be. Then he reached into the front pocket of his pack and pulled out a cloth bundle, and a round bread roll that had gone slightly hard at the edges from travel. He set the bundle between them on the ground without a word. Sira looked at it. She looked at him. He did not say anything. He did not make it into something. He simply left it there, between them, like it belonged there. And after a long moment, with her hands shaking only a little, Sira reached out and picked it up. The bread was hard at the edges and soft in the middle. Sira ate it slowly, the way someone eats when they are afraid the food might disappear if they move too fast. She took small bites and chewed carefully and kept her eyes down. Her hands had stopped shaking by the third bite. Her whole body had gone very still, the way a person goes still when something good is happening and they do not want to disturb it. Ben watched the square. He did not watch her eat. He did not smile at her or nod encouragingly or say anything at all. He simply sat beside her with his back against the wall and his arms resting on his knees and looked out at the busy market like a man with nothing pressing on his mind. That was the strangest part for Sira. In her experience, when people did something for someone else, they wanted something back. They wanted thanks, or they wanted to feel good about themselves, or they wanted the other person to know how generous they were being. There was always a look, a certain kind of look that said, "See what I am doing for you." Ben did not have that look. He just sat. When Sira finished the bread, she folded the cloth it had been wrapped in and held it neatly in her lap, unsure what to do with it. Ben glanced over, saw the cloth, and took it back without comment. He tucked it into his pack and reached in again. He brought out a small wedge of yellow cheese and a strip of dried meat and set them on the ground between them the same way he had set the bread, without ceremony, without making it into a moment. Sira looked at the food. Then at him. "Go ahead," Ben said simply. She ate the cheese first. It was sharp and a little crumbly and tasted better than anything she could remember from the past several weeks. The dried meat came next. It was tough and salty and she had to work at it, but she did not mind. She did not mind anything about it. Around them, the market had shifted. Not dramatically. The stalls were still open, the crowd still moving, the noise still constant. But there was a new quality to the way people near their corner of the square were behaving. Conversations had slowed. Glances had multiplied. A woman who had been arranging cloth bolts on a nearby table had stopped arranging them and was simply standing with her hands resting on the fabric, watching. Two older men standing at the edge of the square had turned so that they were facing Ben and Sira's direction. They were not talking to each other anymore. A young girl of about 8 had stopped walking entirely and was staring with wide, open curiosity until her father took her by the shoulder and pulled her gently forward. Ben noticed all of this the way a calm person notices weather, aware of it, unbothered by it. Sira noticed it too, and her shoulders drew in slightly, the old habit of making herself smaller rising up without her meaning it to. "You can ignore them," Ben said, without looking at her. His voice was quiet enough that only she could hear it. "They are staring," Sira said. It was the first thing she had said to him. Her voice came out rougher than she expected, dry from disuse. "People stare at things they are not used to," Ben said. "It does not mean anything has to happen." Sira considered that. It was a simple thing to say. But no one had said it to her before, and it settled something small and tight in her chest. She looked back at the square. The people were still looking. But she did not draw her shoulders in further. She left them where they were. A merchant from a stall 2 rows across made his way over. He was a broad man with a thick belt and an expression that sat somewhere between concern and irritation. He stopped a few feet from Ben and looked down at him with his arms crossed. "You know what you are sitting next to," the merchant said. "Not a question." Ben looked up at him without any particular change in his expression. "Someone who was hungry," he said. The merchant's jaw tightened. "She has been hanging around this square for days. Making people uncomfortable. Bad for business. Is she breaking any law?" Ben asked. The merchant opened his mouth. Then closed it. "I did not think so," Ben said, and looked back at the square. The merchant stood there another moment, the way people stand when they want to say something more but cannot find exactly what. Then he turned and walked back to his stall. Sira had watched the whole exchange without moving. "Does that happen to you often?" she asked quietly. "People like that." "Often enough," Ben said. "I have found the best thing is to ask a simple question back. Simple questions are hard to argue with." Sira thought about that. She had not had many simple questions asked in her favor lately. "Why are you sitting here?" she asked. The question came out more direct than she meant it to, but Ben did not seem to mind. He thought about it for a moment. Not the way people think when they are looking for a polite answer, but the way people think when they actually want to give an honest one. "You looked like someone who had been sitting in the same place for a long time," he said. "And nobody was sitting with you." Sira was quiet for a moment. "That is all." "That is all," Ben said. It was such a small reason. And yet it was the only reason anyone had given her for doing something kind in longer than she could clearly remember. She looked down at her hands. Her scales were still dull. Her claws were chipped at the tips. Her wings were still too tired to hold up properly. None of that had changed. But she had eaten. Her chest did not feel quite as hollow as it had an hour ago. The weight was still there, the loss and the weeks of it, but it sat differently now. A little less like drowning. A little more like something she was carrying rather than something that was carrying her. Ben reached into his pack one more time and produced a small, slightly bruised apple. He held it out to her. Sira took it. She did not say thank you. She did not know, in that moment, how to make the words come out the right size for what she was feeling. They all seemed either too small or too much. But she took the apple. And she ate it carefully, down to the core. And Ben sat beside her the whole time, watching the square with the same easy, unhurried expression, as though there was nowhere else he had to be and nothing else that needed doing. Around them, the market went on. But in that one corner of the square, something had shifted. Something quiet and unannounced. The kind of thing that does not look like much from the outside but feels, to the person in the middle of it, like the first warm day after a very long winter. The afternoon came in slowly. The market crowd thinned as the sun moved across the sky. Stall owners began covering their goods with cloth. The loudest voices in the square settled into something quieter. The light turned from bright white to a soft, warm gold that stretched long shadows across the stone ground. Ben had not moved. He had shifted once, adjusting how he was sitting, stretching one leg out in front of him. But he had not stood up, had not looked at the road, had not given any sign that he was thinking about leaving. He had bought a small cup of warm broth from a passing seller and set it in front of Sira without comment. She had wrapped both hands around it and held it close, letting the warmth move through her palms and up into her arms. They had not spoken much since the apple. But it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that does not need to be filled. It was Sira who spoke first. "The valley we lived in had a name," she said. Her voice was still rough, but steadier now than before. In the old dragon tongue, it meant the place where the water sings. Because of the river. You could hear it from everywhere in the valley. Even from inside the den, even at night, you could always hear it. Ben turned his head slightly toward her. He did not say anything. He just listened. "I used to think it was annoying," Sira said. "When I was trying to sleep. The sound of it." She paused. "I would give a great deal to hear it now." She took a small sip of the broth. It was plain, just salted water with a little grain in it, but it was warm and she was grateful for it. "The rain started about 2 months ago," she continued. "We had seen heavy rains before. Everyone in the valley had. So at first no one was very worried. The elders said the river had flooded twice before in living memory and the valley had held both times." Ben nodded slowly but said nothing. "But this time it did not stop," Sira said. 3 weeks of rain. Every day. The river kept rising and the ground turned to mud and then the mud started moving. The whole hillside. She stopped. She looked down at the cup in her hands. It moved very fast. Faster than anyone expected. The square around them was quieter now. A few people still moved between the remaining open stalls, but the dense crowd of midday was gone. No one was watching them the way they had been earlier. The merchant who had spoken to Ben had closed his stall and left without another word in their direction. "My mother told me to fly," Sira said. "She pushed me up and told me to go high and not come down until I found solid ground. She said it very clearly, like she had been thinking about what to say and wanted to make sure I heard every word." She was quiet for a moment. "I heard her," Sira said. "So I went." Ben waited. He did not rush her. He did not fill the pause with words or with the kind of sorry that people say when they want the difficult part of a conversation to move along faster. "I do not know where the others went," Sira said. "When I came down, I was alone. I flew for a long time. My wings are not strong enough for very long flights yet. I am still young." She glanced at her wings, folded flat against her back. "When I could not fly anymore, I landed outside this town. I thought I would rest for a day and then keep looking." "How long ago was that?" Ben asked. His voice was quiet and even. 18 days, Sira said. Ben absorbed that without any visible reaction. Not surprise, not pity, not the uncomfortable shift of a person who does not know what to do with a hard truth. He simply took it in, the way a still pool of water takes in a stone, receiving it fully, settling around it. "You have been here 18 days, he said, not as a question but as a way of making sure he had understood correctly. "Yes," Sira said. "And in 18 days, Ben said carefully, no one sat with you." It was not quite a question either. Sira looked at him. "A few people threw things," she said. "Not to hurt. To make me move on." She paused. "I did not move on because I did not know which direction to go. I thought if I stayed in one place, someone from the clan might pass through. Someone might see me. Did anyone? No, she said simply. Ben was quiet for a moment. Then he said, do you know if any of them got out? Sira shook her head. I do not know. I hope so. My mother is a strong flyer. Stronger than me. And my uncle was downstream when the rain started, trading in another settlement. He would not have been in the valley when it happened. She stopped. I tell myself that. That he was not there. That is a reasonable thing to tell yourself, Ben said. Because it is probably true. Sira looked at him. You do not know that. No, Ben agreed. But I know that holding the worst possibility in your head every moment does not make it more true. It just makes every moment harder. He paused. Your uncle being safe costs you nothing to believe until you know otherwise. Sira considered that for a long time. She turned the cup slowly in her hands. No one had said that to her. In 18 days, no one had said much of anything to her that was worth keeping. She had received suspicion and discomfort and the particular cruelty of being looked at like a problem rather than a person. She had not received anything that felt like this. Like someone thinking carefully about what might actually help. You are not afraid of me, she said. It came out as an observation, slightly puzzled. Ben thought about it. Should I be? Most people are, Sira said. I am a dragon. You are 14 years old and you have been sitting against this wall for 18 days, Ben said, without any edge to it. The most dangerous thing about you right now is probably that apple core. Sira looked down. The apple core was still beside her on the ground. It was not dangerous at all. It was just an apple core. Something moved in her chest. Warm and unexpected. She did not laugh, she was too tired for that, and too much had happened, but something in her face changed. Something loosened that had been wound very tight for a very long time. My mother would have found that funny, she said quietly. She sounds like a sensible person, Ben said. She is, Sira said. Present tense. Deliberate. Ben heard it. He did not correct her. He did not add any careful words about hoping or waiting to see. He just nodded. And they sat together as the last of the afternoon light moved slowly across the square and the town around them grew quiet, and for the first time in 18 days, Sira did not feel entirely alone inside the silence. The sun was low when Groa arrived. She came in from the eastern road, which was the old road, the one that ran along the ridge above the valley before dropping down into the town through a narrow pass between two hills. It was not the road most travelers used. It was longer and rougher and it climbed in places that made it hard going. But Groa knew it well. She had walked it many times over many years, and she preferred it because it gave a clear view of the town below before you entered it. She stopped at the top of the pass and looked down. Groa was old. Not ancient, but old in the way that carries weight, the kind of old that comes from having seen many things and carried many of them quietly. Her scales were a deep gray-green, darkened with age from what had once been a brighter color. Her horns had gone pale at the tips. She walked with a staff, not because she needed it to stand, but because she had carried it for 40 years and it had become part of how she moved through the world. She had heard about the girl 3 days ago. Word had come through a trader passing between settlements, a fragment of information, vague and secondhand, about a young dragon seen at the edge of a market town to the west. Alone. Thin. Not moving on. Groa had known immediately. There were not many young dragons traveling alone in this part of the country. After the flood, after the valley, after everything, she had been looking. They had all been looking, the survivors who had managed to find each other in the weeks following the disaster. They had spread out in different directions, asking questions, following rumors, checking every settlement within a reasonable distance. This was the 4th town Groa had come to. She had not let herself hope too much on the road here. Hope, in her experience, was a thing that needed to be rationed carefully. Too much of it made the finding harder when the finding did not come. But she had walked faster than usual on this road. Her old legs had not complained, which they usually did on the uphill sections. From the top of the pass, she could see the market square below. Most of the stalls were closed by now. The square was emptying out, the last of the day's business finishing up. A few lamps had been lit at the edges of the square, throwing soft circles of yellow light across the stone ground. Groa's eyes were still good. Dragon eyes held their sharpness longer than most things about a dragon aged. She scanned the square slowly, the way she did everything, without rushing, without letting the wanting of a thing interfere with the seeing of it. She found them in the far corner, against the base of the stone wall. She went very still. There was a girl there. Small, wings flat, scales dull in the way that said clearly and immediately that she had not been eating properly. Even from this distance, even in the low evening light, Groa could read the shape of her. The tucked posture. The careful stillness. And beside her, sitting on the ground with his back against the same wall, was a human. Groa watched. She did not move down into the town yet. She stood at the top of the pass with her staff planted in the ground and watched, because what she was seeing did not match what she had prepared herself for, and she wanted to understand it before she did anything else. The human was not doing anything alarming. He was not standing over the girl, not gesturing, not in any posture that suggested threat or authority. He was simply sitting. His arms rested on his knees. He appeared to be talking, or listening, it was hard to tell from this distance. But his body was relaxed and his face, what she could see of it, was turned toward the girl in the easy way of someone having an ordinary conversation. The girl was eating something. Groa's chest tightened. She watched for a long time. Long enough to be sure of what she was seeing. Long enough to see that the human reached into his pack at one point and produced something else, she could not tell what. And set it on the ground between them. Long enough to see the girl take it without hesitation, which told Groa that this had been going on for a while. You do not take food without hesitation from someone you have just met. That ease between them had been built over hours. Groa began walking down into the town. She did not go directly to the square. She came in through a side street, the way she usually entered unfamiliar towns, quietly, without drawing attention before she was ready for it. She was large enough that she could not avoid being noticed entirely, but she had learned over many decades how to move in a way that did not immediately cause alarm. Slow steps. Staff on the ground. No sudden movements. Eyes forward, expression calm. She came around the edge of the last building and entered the square from the side, stopping in the shadow at the corner of a closed stall. From here she was perhaps 30 feet from them. She could see clearly now. The girl was Sira. Groa was certain of it within a moment. She had known Sira since she was very small. She knew the shape of her horns, the particular angle of her wings, the way she held her head slightly to one side when she was listening to something. All of it was there. Thinner, much thinner, and worn in a way that made something in Groa's chest pull hard, but there. Present. Alive. Groa did not call out. She stood in the shadow and watched. The human was speaking. She was close enough now to hear the tone, though not every word. His voice was unhurried. He said something and Sira responded, and then he said something else, and Sira's posture shifted in a way that Groa recognized. The slight release of tension in the shoulders, the small change in how the head was held. It was the posture of someone who has been listened to. Groa had been an elder for 23 years. She knew the difference between a person who was being managed and a person who was being heard. She knew it the way she knew the difference between a fire that was under control and one that was not. It was not always loud or visible. Sometimes it was just a shift in the shoulders. She stayed where she was. A younger version of herself might have walked straight over. Claimed Sira, thanked the human briefly, moved on. But Groa had lived long enough to know that some moments needed to be witnessed before they were interrupted. What was happening in that corner of the square was small and quiet and looked like almost nothing from the outside. But she had seen enough of the world to know that almost nothing was sometimes everything. So she stood. And she watched. And she did not say a word. The last light left the sky. The lamps in the square burned a little brighter in the growing dark. And Groa waited, patient as stone, as the human beside her clanmate said something that made Sira, for the first time in longer than Groa wanted to count, sit up just a little straighter. Groa stepped out of the shadow. She moved slowly, as she always did, her staff marking each step on the stone ground with a quiet tap. She came around the edge of the closed stall and crossed the square toward the corner where Ben and Sira sat, and she did not hurry, because she had learned long ago that the way you approach a thing shapes what that thing becomes. Sira saw her first. She went very still. Then something in her face broke open, not dramatically, not with noise, but in the quiet way that a person's face breaks open when they see something they had stopped letting themselves look for. Her eyes went wide and her breath caught, and for a moment she did not move at all. Then she was on her feet. She crossed the distance between them faster than her tired legs should have allowed, and Groa opened her arms and caught her, and held her with the particular firmness of someone who has been looking for a long time and does not intend to let go quickly. Sira did not make any sound. She pressed her face against the elder's shoulder and held on, and Groa held back, one large hand against the girl's back, feeling how thin she had become, how the bones of her wings sat too close to the surface. Ben had risen to his feet. He stood a short distance away, his pack in his hands, giving them space. His expression was calm and quiet, the expression of a man who understood that this moment did not belong to him and was glad of it. After a long time, Groa loosened her hold. She kept one hand on Sira's shoulder and looked at her carefully, the way elders look at the young when they are checking something more than what the eyes can see. "You are thin," Groa said. "I know," Sira said. Her voice was thick. "We will fix that," Groa said simply. Then she looked over Sira's head at Ben. Ben met her eyes without flinching, which she noted. Many people, when looked at directly by a dragon elder, found something else to look at. He did not. He stood straight and calm and waited, the way a person waits when they have nothing to hide and nothing to prove. Groa studied him for a moment. Then she crossed to him, closing the distance in a few slow steps, and stopped when she was close enough to speak without raising her voice. "You sat with her," Groa said. "Yes," Ben said. "For how long?" Ben considered. "Most of the afternoon. Since midday." Groa looked at him steadily. "And you fed her?" "I shared what I had," Ben said. "It was not very much." "It was enough," Groa said. "It was more than enough." She was quiet for a moment. The square around them was nearly empty now. A lamp at the far end flickered in a slight wind. Somewhere in the town behind them, a door closed. "I need to tell you something," Groa said. "Because you should know, even though it will not change what you did or why you did it." Ben waited. "In the old law of our people," Groa said, "there is a principle that has been kept since before this town existed. Before most towns existed." She paused, choosing her words with care. To feed the hungry is not a small act among dragonkind. It is not simply kindness. It is a declaration. When you place food before one of our clan and sit beside them while they eat, you are saying, with your actions, that you count them as your own. That their hunger is your concern. That they do not face it alone. Ben was quiet, listening. "It is called the act of kinship," Groa continued. "And in our law, it cannot be undone or dismissed. It does not matter whether you knew the law. The act is the act. The meaning is in the doing, not in the knowing." Ben looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at Sira, who was standing a little behind Groa, watching him with an expression he could not quite read. "I did not know any of that," Ben said. "I know you did not," Groa said. "That is part of what makes it matter." Ben took that in slowly. He was not a man who responded to things quickly, which Groa had already decided she respected. He thought about what had been said before he answered it. "Is there something I am supposed to do?" he asked. "Or not do?" "No," Groa said. "There is only something I am supposed to give you." She reached into the fold of the cloth she wore across her shoulder. From somewhere inside it she drew out a small flat piece of dark stone, smooth and rectangular, not much larger than her palm. On its surface, carved in thin careful lines, were marks that Ben did not recognize. The marks of the old dragon tongue, angular and deliberate, each one pressed into the stone with intention. She held it out to him. Ben looked at it. Then he took it, carefully, holding it in both hands the way you hold something you understand to be significant even if you do not yet understand why. "What does it say?" he asked. Groa was quiet for a moment. "In your language," she said, "the closest meaning is this: one who gives without counting the cost." She paused. "It is a name. Not the name your family gave you. A name our people give. It is not given often." She looked at the stone in his hands. "In all my years as elder, I have given it twice before. Both times to dragons." Ben looked down at the stone. The carved marks were clean and even. Someone had made this carefully, over time, with a steady hand. "You carry these with you?" he asked. "I carry 3, Groa said. "I have carried them for many years. I did not know who they were for until I needed to give them." She closed her hands around her staff. "Now I know who one of them was for." Ben looked up at her. There was something in his face that was not quite any one thing, not pride, not embarrassment, not the performed humility of someone trying to seem modest. It was something quieter than all of those. The look of a person receiving something they do not feel they have earned, and not knowing what to do with that feeling. "I only sat beside her," he said. "Yes," Groa said. "You only sat beside her. In 18 days, you were the only one who did." Ben had no answer for that. He looked down at the stone again. His thumb moved slowly across the carved surface, feeling the lines. Sira stepped forward. She stopped beside Groa and looked at Ben with those same tired eyes that had been so carefully blank when he had first crouched down in front of her hours ago. They were not blank now. They were full of something that she did not have words for, in any language. "Thank you," she said. It came out small and plain and completely honest. Ben looked at her. He nodded once, the way a person nods when words are not the right size for the moment. Groa placed her hand briefly on Ben's arm. Then she turned, and put her hand on Sira's shoulder, and began walking her slowly toward the eastern road. Toward home, toward what remained of the clan, toward the long and necessary work of rebuilding. Ben stood in the empty square and watched them go. He looked down once more at the stone in his hands. At the carved marks he could not read but would not forget. Then he put it carefully in the front pocket of his pack, close to where he kept the cloth he wrapped his bread in. And he stood quietly in the lamplight, in the empty square, in the kind of silence that does not feel empty at all.